Hey, Gilles. Thank you so much for joining the TEDxStudio series. It's wonderful to have you with us. For those who've not met you before, you're Gilles Babinet. You're a serial entrepreneur, having founded many successful businesses over the last 30 years, spanning a whole range of diverse enterprises: consulting, construction, music, design, marketing. The list goes on. You're a digital visionary and currently co-chair of the French Digital Council, or CNN, as I think it's abbreviated, which means that you're involved in making recommendations relating to the impact of technologies on economy and also society, as well as being a digital champion for the European Commission. But that's not all. You're a professor and you've written 4 books with a focus on technology and how it's shaping our world, as well as being a member of the EDF Foundation and a co-founder, I believe, of Africa for Tech. So busy, I would say.
Thank you.
And obviously very accomplished. So it's great to have you with us today. Can you give me a sense, can you give us an insight into your brain and how you think the world is going to be shaped by, as you were saying, AI and other trends coming over the horizon?
You know, it was interesting because recently I was in a Gartner conference, and what they said was basically most of the AI market will be coming from chipsets that are very teeny and very inexpensive, like 50-cent chipsets. You know, chipset that would allow you to tell you to your coffee machine, make me a latte or an espresso, you know, thing like that. And this is happening, actually. We're starting to see things like this mostly everywhere, but we're going to have more and more. You know, a very good example is something you haven't noticed yet, is the fact that in the street, in enterprise, in many places, you have cameras. And these cameras are automated. They are tracking you. They are following you. When you move, they're just following you. There is no one monitoring this camera. It's automated. And this is AI, basically. You know, it can differentiate a car from a person. And those cameras, you can buy some of these for like $30. You know, it's nothing. And it's based on chipsets that are massively available since years, actually. And not only tomorrow, this camera is going to be able to track you, but to personally track you. You would have like a set of 10 of these cameras, and those will be able to say, okay, Sairah got into the company at 11 a.m. and then she moved from this to there and to here and so on. So it's a little bit Orwellian to this extent, actually. But putting this apart, I believe it's interesting to understand that it's not only technologies that are isolated, it's networks of AI that are now being put in place. And this is extremely powerful. It will be basically everywhere. You don't notice it, but in most of the apps you are using nowadays, there is AI. In your smartphone, there is a lot of AI. When you type on the keyboards, the correction is based on AI, and so on and so on. So it's getting there. And the fact that we don't see it is that it's because it's getting there very progressively. And it softens our lives. It makes them more comfortable, more user-friendly, more UX-driven. And therefore, it's something which we tend to accept because it doesn't look like Orwellian in the sense that we don't see big robots and we don't see things that are uncomfortable to us. So I think this is the biggest trend, is the one that we see the less, because overall, the goal of the technology is to disappear. A good technology is not visible.
So we're on a continuum of the technology and AI specifically just integrating into real life and making it more convenient and smoother and enabling us to do things. Like years ago, you had to get out a map to find yourself somewhere. Now we've got all sorts of technologies that help us overcome that. So you can draw parallels with lots of different things going on in our life. An obvious question to ask, one I've certainly asked myself over the years, is how you screen out bias and some of the ethics around that. And I imagine that's something that you kind of wrestled with as a topic many times. Although I don't think anyone's got a kind of hard and clear answer.
Yeah, I don't actually. It's very right. Actually, I was involved in a few, I would say, regulation about AI. I had interviews with the Commission about the Data Act and the DSA, probably, and a few others at the French level as well. And it's complicated because, for instance, if I take the Data Act, it's been released like a year ago or something like that, and it's probably already a bit old-fashioned because of ChatGPT. We realize that there are plenty of challenges, issues that have been raised by ChatGPT, and actually on which we don't have any answer. So it's a lot about actually what you just mentioned, ethics, not law. It's about the fact that we don't want to do harm as a company, as an organization, and therefore, because we can't have the law before the experimentation, before the innovation, we need progressively to accept these technologies and to correct post, I would say, usage of these technologies, what is the most harmful, and it's the right way to do it. I think that the European way is interesting because we really want to have, I would say, a common spec, which is space which is inclusive, but at the same time, we are at risk of having inappropriate regulations, and I would say innovation freezing regulation as well.
Yeah, I tend to agree because the legislation will always follow rather than be in front because it takes time, and you have to find people to make the legislation who understand the technologies in the first place, and they're moving at quite a pace, aren't they? So I understand that, which puts more of an emphasis on, I think, the people who are producing the technology and applying it to think about some of these things. But also, I imagine for the adoption of it to be done in stages, or to be thought about with some sort of staging post to look back, not just forward, before you go too much further and build too much into the system that you then can't unwind if you want to later.
Yeah, that's true. And that would be probably the best way. But actually, most of this technology are coming not in an incremental way, but in breakthrough ways. It comes as a sudden, and we just realize how powerful it is almost immediately, and therefore you probably need to accept that if you want to move forward, you need to break things, So I'm thinking about the motto that was the one of Facebook. They removed it like a few years back, which was move fast and break things. And it's very punk. It's very unfriendly, so to say, but it's the reality. It's what is currently happening in the Silicon Valley, in all these spaces.
And do you think we're going to see successive waves of new types of businesses then leapfrog what's been there before because they've got access to these new technologies? Or do you think some of these big tech players will be able to invest enough or break things themselves, still be punk enough to be able to keep evolving fast enough?
Yeah. The big discussion nowadays is whether Google will be disintermediated by ChatGPT. And that's a real question, because you probably saw that Microsoft decided to invest like hell, 10 billion into it, because they see that there is a teeny space for them to regain the market share that they lost in the search. And it's something that we may see more and more. You may have like one new company that will be one of the leader in, let's say, diagnosis in the medical space. You could have like new companies and the automotive industry that will come with an autonomous car that could take a huge marketplace or whatever. you'll see that. You'll see some of these in many spaces. In education, for instance, I believe that there will be tons of things. You could have an interaction that the one we have now with a virtual teacher that will understand who you are, what is the conceptually blocking you for learning faster, and helping you to train and improve this bottleneck. And so it may look scary, but actually it could be very good news as well.
Yeah, I agree. There are some exciting applications. If I think about, so I left school also at 15, just before my 16th birthday.
You did?
Yeah, I did. I had interests beyond staying in academia at the time. I went back to studying much later in life. And I think it would have been great to have an ability in education to play to the needs of individuals, as opposed to having to sort of blanket educate everyone in the same way. Because obviously there's a lot of neurodiversity, there's a lot of just different interests. You know, perhaps my development journey could have been accelerated through a different kind of learning style, just all sorts of things. And the same with health, you know, and personalizing health as well. So I can see those as two massive areas for, you know, for this technology to be transformational. And that must be one of the things that you're thinking about from a kind of government policy sort of shaping kind of a level, which I imagine for some of these bodies is a slightly kind of overwhelming, terrifying thing to try and figure out, because it's not like business where maybe breaking things and doing that at speed, it doesn't have the same sort of consequences, I guess.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, actually, it's for public administration. It's one of the biggest challenge, you know, because I would say that there are two folds. The first one is the user experience. Generally, public administration are very bad at providing a good UI, and a lot of people are complaining about that. And also there is, you know, most of what they do is very bureaucratic, and there is a lot of things that are very tailorized, and therefore you can probably replace a lot of these public servants with AI as well. So that's something which hasn't really been so far a challenge, and I think that over the next couple of years it will be more and more. They will have to decide. So, you know, the good news is that most of the states, they have so many missions to accomplish that they will be able to displace workers. But I think that, you know, there is this concept of bullshit jobs. And we're going to see a lot of these jobs disappearing. I'm not among those who believe that the machine will disintermediate us at all. You know, I think that there are plenty of things which will require people on the long run. But I think that we're going to see a lot of, I would say, Schumpeterian destruction. People having the job being displaced by a machine. Think about truck drivers in a frame of like maybe 10 years. It's very likely that the 5 million truck driver in the US start to become disintermediated. And same for a lot of workers.
And is it too soon to be able to predict what kinds of jobs that work hand in hand with this kind of technology will be needed in the future, what we're going to be training for? Because I think that's one of the things that it's a real struggle to imagine what these new jobs are going to be. And once upon a time, years ago, you'd say, well, everyone just needs to learn how to code and become more savvy in that area. But of course, with the way technology has evolved, you don't need to be able to code to be able to successfully work with technology. So those jobs aren't necessarily the ones we're trying to train for in the future. So yeah, in your crystal ball, what direction would you head in?
But actually, coding is a very good example, because actually, you know, the way you code today has nothing to see with the way you used to code like 10 to 15 years ago at all. Now you would mostly go on platforms such as GitHub. You would take some pieces of code and you would glue them together. It's what you do like 99% of the time. And you'll probably do kind of the same thing with AI. The first skill that will be needed is to be able to describe what you want to do. And actually, it's already a very challenging competence today, because most of the coder have, I would say, real issues in describing what they want to do. And a lot of the problem we're facing is due to the fact that the definition scope of what was expected was not clear enough. And I think that talking to GPT, which actually understands, is able to code in Python, you have this issue. You definitely do. The way you define what you expect is the rationale to have some good coding or not. And on the long run, this will stay. You will have to not only be able to define what you want to do, but also to implement it. So to put it into, I would say, a platformization of the coding, which is extremely challenging. And the supervision will necessarily, I mean, at least for the 10, 15 years to come, be human. I don't see any platform be able to say, okay, you want to deal with, like, for instance, social security, authorization, expenses, authorization. Let's give it to an AI. This is so complex, so depending of the terms and the person and the doctors and so on. You will never have such things in the mid-range.
Yes. It was making me think about some of the applications of the future, because I think you're right. There'll always need to be checks and balances of some kind, whether it's a human doing something or a piece of technology doing something. But the role of technology in society could be huge. For example, if in Europe, where there's a rapidly aging population and not enough people to look after us, we're going to see, I think, a huge accent on preventative healthcare, so that we make healthy choices before we get to a certain age where we would need more care. And then presumably technology attached to mobility, robotics, could then become part of the answer in terms of taking care of day-to-day tasks in a way that they don't at the moment, which has huge implications for society, but also for how you manage and legislate that and integrate it into policy at the same time, which, that just blows my mind. I wouldn't even know where to start with that.
Yeah, no, you're right, actually. And two countries are probably leading the aging population challenge, Norway and Japan. And both have tried and used robotic a lot, mostly Japan, actually. And the feedback they have provided to the research is really valuable. It's interesting to see that you have some robots, contrary to my belief, for instance, that were able to improve the mood of people by making conversation. So that was something which I didn't believe first. And actually, for a lot of people, especially some people with some mental disease such as Alzheimer's, it's useful. It's useful. Obviously, we don't want. No one wants to have the elderly people become isolated and having discussion only with robots. We don't want that. But it can help. It can definitely help to help these people continue to leave home, for instance, without going to some hospice and things like that. All this is interesting. It's if you think only with the rationale of saving money and so on, you're probably not doing the right move.
This has been fascinating. Thank you so much, Gilles.
Thank you.
It's been great. I've really enjoyed picking your brains a little, and I feel like we've probably just scratched the surface.
No, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure having this conversation.